Welcome to day number 10 of the 10-year YouTube celebration. And today, I am going to be taking a look at a video I recorded back on April 26th, 2018 called Let's Talk About The Last of Us. And so, that video, I called it Let's Talk About The Last of Us, but really it was Let's Talk About Grounded Mode in The Last of Us Remastered. That's really what it was. I didn't really talk about the game at all, besides Grounded Mode specifically. And I rewatched it while I was on my lunch break at work today to get down some bullet points of things that I talked about in the original I wanted to bring up here. So in the original, I talked about having an issue with melee weapons when striking stalkers in the game. For those of you who don't know, I don't know why you would if you're watching this, but for those of you who don't know, stalkers in The Last of Us are the stage 2 infected. It goes runners, stalkers, clickers, bloaters. Regardless. So, and stalkers, they're, like their name suggests, they'll run, hide, and then try and get the jump on you. That's what stalkers do. They basically turn you into the hunted, and I was having issues at the time with when swinging a melee weapon and hitting stalkers. And I do think there's a part of that is a little bit true. I do think stalkers, and infected in general, can sometimes almost override a melee hit from you as the player. But I don't think it's all that often, personally. And I look back at like the footage I showed for the video, and I think it's just like me being bad. Personally, I think that's what it is. And that's the only way I can look at it, is every example I could ever think of experiencing that, I look back and now and it's like, well, no, I mainly just would always swing a little bit early. And because I swung a little bit early, like my animation for swinging just ended and then they jumped me. Like they grabbed me. And that's normally what happened. The next thing I talked about was mainly just various areas in the game that I just struggled with. And the first one I mentioned was Enemy of My Enemy from Left Behind, which is the last actual combat encounter in Left Behind, the DLC. And it was mainly me talking about that last encounter, the 2-stage fight, when the guys in the mall are trying to get to Joel and the horse. And yeah, I mean, I did the part 1, the remake. I got the platinum and also did Left Behind on Grounded. You know? And yeah, it was still very difficult in the remake as well. And that's just a very difficult fight. It really is. Especially since it's Left Behind, you're Ellie. Ellie doesn't have all that many supplies, you know, unless you're admittedly playing on a lower difficulty, but I was playing on Grounded, like I said, and that was the whole point of the video as well, was me talking about my experience on Grounded. And yeah, it is just a very difficult encounter for all the reasons I said, along with it being a 2-stage fight, and if you somehow get through the first stage and you've exhausted all of your resources, well, you are at a serious disadvantage for part 2 of the fight. So yeah, it's definitely, I think in all of the first game, if we include Left Behind in it, I think it's easily the hardest encounter in the entire game. I really do think Enemy of My Enemy, specifically that last encounter, the 2-stage fight, is the hardest encounter. It's like I said, it's very difficult, and I still struggle with it to this day, whether it be remastered or on the remake. The next thing I talked about was having troubles in the bookstore, and my main issue there was, the main thing I talked about was trying to take everyone out in the bookstore so I could get all the collectibles, and particularly get Ellie's jokes once you take out everyone. That was the real issue, and again, it's still a bit of an issue. But I'll be honest, whenever I play the game, I don't really go for a collectibles run anymore. I mainly only did that to specifically get the trophies attached to it. Like, I love the collectibles. I think the collectibles in Last of Us are great, especially the artifacts, like the notes you can pick up and read. I love those. And I do actually like Ellie's jokes. Like, I love puns. Well, I love puns most of the time. But yeah, in general, I do think, especially when playing on Grounded or any higher difficulty, you know, a difficulty you're not used to, I think, yeah, the bookstore can be difficult if you're in that situation and you are trying to go for everything. But in general, it's a really easy area to get through if you're not going for all the collectibles. It's pretty easy to sneak through and then not really alert anyone, you know? Well, I say that, but I did struggle with it in the remake, so do with that what you will. You know what? I need to play the remake more and make some content on it. Really get my thoughts on that and compare them to remastered. Potential video idea. Keep that in mind, future me. But the next area I talked about in the original was the coal mine, and yeah, the coal mine has always given me trouble. Again, it's another 2-stage fight like the last encounter of my enemy and Left Behind. The first one, you know, is just very close quarters, and if you're not, like, on the ball taking out the infected, especially if you're not on the ball taking the infected before they jump in the building, it is so difficult, and you can't really rely on David to, like, start punching them or, like, being grabbed by them so you can kind of come in out of nowhere and take them out real quick. You can't fully rely on that in such a tight space. So yeah, the coal mine's always given me trouble. It still gives me trouble. Funny enough, I don't remember having too much trouble with it in the remake. But maybe I just blocked that out. Again, I've only done like one playthrough of the remake. Like one full playthrough of the remake, so I need to put more time into that. I really only did the one playthrough, I think, just to get the platinum for it. But yeah, so I do still agree that I think that encounter is pretty difficult. And then the next thing I brought up in the original was Ellie's escape in winter. And I did both parts of it. Part one, I called it where, you know, David chokes out Ellie at the end, and then the one after, you know, she says Ellie's the little girl that broke your fucking finger, you know. Love that line still, great line. But yeah, I said both parts, and at the time, yeah, I genuinely just struggled with those parts a lot. Again, I don't really remember having too much difficulty with it the last few times I've played it. I don't really remember having too much difficulty with it on the remake as well. But in saying that, I do remember genuinely having a lot of trouble with it, and they can be tricky. They can be tricky, especially if, you know, you're trying to keep in stealth, but maybe you're not too good at it. Which is obviously the way you should go, because you're 14-year-old Ellie. You're super small. Like, you're a little girl, you know? Like, everyone else is big, is much bigger, more powerful, and are well more equipped than you. So you have to play it smart, and it can be tricky. But the next thing after those two I brought up was the hotel basement, particularly dealing with the stalkers, which kind of called back to the very first point of that video. And yeah, the hotel basement is a pain in the ass. I have less issues with it now, mainly because I'm more familiar with, like, it's not the speedrun strat anymore, but it was one of the former strats for the game that the speedrun community came up with. So I'm familiar with that, and that really helps. I mean, even just doing something simple like throwing a couple of nail bombs behind the generator, activating the generator first, the stalkers then are blown up by the nail bombs, allowing you to activate the generator, climb up, grab the key card, and then you can kind of do a little dance around and get around the bloater. It's really easy in Remastered. I have not found a good strategy for that in Part 1, the remake. So, I can't really tell you that. But I also have not really delved into the speedrun scene for the remake, I'll be honest. I'm way less familiar with that. But yeah, remastered, at the very least, just throw a nail bomb down behind the generator. That, or at least take out the stalker, allowing you to activate the generator and getting the lights on, which does help a bit. The next thing I talked about was Escape the City with Henry and Sam. And yeah, that one, what can I say? That, no matter what, the remake, the remastered, the original on PS3, it doesn't really matter. I am god-awful at escaping the city with Henry and Sam. Like, the part where you're at night, by the way, I should mention that. But I'm god-awful at it. I'm super bad at it. So, yeah. Really bad. I don't know what it is. I just can't find a good strategy that consistently works for me. But it's, again, probably just me being bad and being inconsistent with my gameplay. So, there's that. Another pain-in-the-ass encounter I wanted to mention was the upside-down shooting in Billstown, and the only thing I mentioned in the original was specifically it being a pain because on Grounded you can't let them just run up to you, mash square to knock them off and get the lined-up headshot, which again, on lower difficulties is a really cool thing. I do like that, but one, you should never rely on that anyway, because even on lower difficulties, if you're at a low enough health, they will just automatically kill you if you try to let that happen. So, one, you just shouldn't rely on that anyway. And two, I'm better at it now, so it's not too difficult. Like, I don't know the last time I had difficulty with it, with that section. You know, I'm not a great shot for, like, shooters, but, like, it's not too difficult. That was definitely past me just being bad. And trying to overly rely on, like, the little lower difficulty strat. Which, again, is cool. I like that. But, again, you shouldn't overly rely on that anyway. Even on lower difficulties. Because you can still die with that happening. With doing that. But the final thing I mentioned in the original... Well, it's actually not the final thing, but I talked about... For some reason, I split up Ellie's escape. Both of Ellie's escape parts in Winter. So the first part of the escape in Winter I said last, but I talked about that already. So the last thing to mention from the original video was the first infected encounter for downtown. And you know what? Fair play past me, because again, that encounter is a bit of a pain in the ass. Mainly because, again, remaster and remake both, I just can't find a consistent strat for it, I'll be honest. Like, I've gotten a few different strats to work, but my biggest issue for that encounter has always been, I love stealth, so I have always wanted to try and do the entire thing in stealth. Which is difficult, because you have to take everyone out, and there's particularly one runner who is a pain in the ass. But, yeah, no, I have found some strategies that work, not consistently, but with some more practice, I know I'll be able to figure that out. So, yeah. It is a pain in the ass encounter, though. Especially, again, when, like, you're not too familiar, and you don't have that much practice or anything. Like, if you play the game, like, a couple of times but spread out apart, and, like, you're like, maybe I should jump back into Last of Us, you know? That encounter will probably kick your ass. To be honest. But that is everything that I talked about in the original, with me commenting on it now. I don't have much else to say, and I need this to be shorter, because, I am running out of time to get this done. So with that being said, that was day 10 of the 10-year YouTube celebration, where I talk about my original Let's Talk About The Last of Us video from April 26th, 2018. Those were all my thoughts based on what I said back in 2018. Hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, I'll see you later. Bye, guys.